So I would like to next introduce Matt Rantanen, who will be presenting Native American Nations. The pandemic was a catalyst for a need for connectivity, but are we connected yet? So Matt Rantanen is Director of Technology at Arcadian Infracom at the Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association. Of Cree, Finnish, and Norwegian descent, Matt is a cyber warrior for community networking. And he'll be joining us on the NANOG stage for the third time since 2019. Welcome, Matt. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Good day. Let's see, no, I'm not keeping you from lunch, so is everybody awake? Enough coffee? We're good? Look a little slow? Okay. All right. Try not to bore you. This is an interesting statement. Obviously, we all felt wounded by the stay-at-home order and went home, and if you didn't have internet, which I can't believe anybody in this room doesn't have internet, but you went home and didn't have internet, you quickly ordered internet. You had probably a queue to wait 3 or 4 weeks to get your internet hooked up, and then your problem solved, or upgrade to your system. Well, the reservations, the 574 federally recognized nations, predominantly don't have access to broadband. So there is some cellular penetration on some of the lands. There are some small WISP providers on some of the lands, but predominantly no access to internet. So they went home. If they were able to do remote work, they couldn't, so they lost their job. Their kids went home and effectively lost about a year of school. So I'm assuming this is forward. You basically went home and sat in a box and tried to figure out how the hell to solve this problem. So a lot of us who have been building networks with Native American communities and being a part of this started thinking about how to solve this problem and how to get around this. And one of the issues is that there's 8,000 missing middle miles in the lower 48 states. So the networks were built around the Native American reservations because they were obstacles and they slowed the construction process down. So there's one problem, and that's roughly in the $1 billion range. And then you have this 574 nations to build a network on. Some are really small. Some of them are Navajo, which is 27,000 square miles. So, not one size fits all, not one solution fits all. How do you solve that? Okay, so that's in maybe the $7 billion range, but creeping up with inflation and lack of access to product, to construction folks that aren't already busy, things like that. We've actually probably seen that increase to maybe a $10 billion range. So affordable middle mile access is a missing element. You have a sufficient funding problem. So everybody's heard about the broadband money that's coming through Department of Commerce, through NTIA, the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program, the IIJA, I don't remember the acronym, Investment Something Jobs Act. And so you have roughly $3 billion coming through the pipeline. So I sort of laid out the math on about a $10 billion problem. So we have a third of it being looked at with the right amount of dollars. Last mile solutions. A lot of tribes are getting into this space because they're being forced. The carriers, the existing carriers, have been incentivized by the federal government. I don't know how many times, but I'm sure it's more than this. And they've figured out how not to serve that population because it falls within a 1.5%. Oh, I don't have to serve 1.5% of my population, I only have to hit 98.5% of my population. Or I don't have to serve my total geographic area, I only have to serve a certain percentage. Well, the hard ones get left behind, and that happens to be the tribes. Tribes are also lacking in some human resources, right? So there are tribes that have as few as 50 members. There are tribes that have as many as 300,000 members. But all of you in this room, I'm sure right now, are feeling a little bit of a crunch in trying to add new staff to your business, new qualified technical staff to your business. Well, if you're having trouble, think about how hard it is for Native American folks to bring in a network administrator or a network designer or a network engineer. So those things are really complicated. Not to mention there's a big learning curve. whenever we get access to something on the reservations, we excel at it. So access to gaming, we're doing very well in gaming. Access to green energy, doing very well in green energy. You know, access to broadband, okay, we're going to get really good at it, but it takes time. And with 574 nations at different levels of capacity, you have, an issue there. And then digital sovereignty. This is a question that will be addressed in the coming weeks at National Congress of American Indians. There's a bunch of range of digital sovereignty, but tribes are sovereign nations. Trustees of federal government, we have that relationship. We like to own our infrastructure on our tribal land. We don't like to give away that control, so that if carrier A is supplying services over our infrastructure and decides to change their mind about the price, or decide that they want to throttle our speeds or do something crazy, then we want to be able to shut them off at the beginning and entice a new carrier to come in and use the existing infrastructure. And ownership of that infrastructure makes that possible. So I'm involved with a whole bunch of stuff. I work for the Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association. I'm in my 21st, well, actually starting my 22nd year now as Director of Technology, and that's 25 federally recognized tribes. But I'm currently on loan to the Golden State Network, which is the state of California's SB 156, which is a bill that introduced $3.25 billion for middle mile ring architecture infrastructure throughout the state to connect the unserved and underserved. There are 109 tribes in California, and I have a relationship with maybe 50 of them. So I was asked to participate in this effort to make sure that we didn't drop the ball moving forward. So I am actually doing a lot of work with the California tribes right now to make sure that they're aligned with that money. 600 million more, I believe it was added to that pot. So we're almost at $4 billion building middle mile infrastructure. I'm working with the Department of Technology of California and then Caltrans as well. So we're identifying opportunity throughout California for erasing that middle mile problem I talked about, the 8,000 missing miles. So California has roughly 1,800 of those missing miles. So hopefully this project will erase most of those 1,800 miles, solve that piece so that the tribes building their end network can then access middle mile at reasonable pricing instead of the gouging that happens today, if there is even connectivity. I also work with Arcadian Infracom. We have representatives in the room here too, building long-haul dark fiber throughout the US. So the announced routes currently are Los Angeles to Dallas using Interstate 40. We are Phoenix to Salt Lake, Phoenix to Denver. We have partnerships with the Navajo, Southern Ute, and many other tribes along those routes, providing backhaul services, lit services, as well as profit revenue share. And we're trying to set the standard for how to currently work with Native American tribes. They are not an obstacle. They're a partner in your path. So then during COVID, we had an issue with tribes needed training, but all the reservations closed down. They didn't want to bring anybody onto the reservation because the fear of the pandemic, bringing that into a closed population would be very detrimental to their health. So they reached out and said, hey, how do we do this during COVID? What do we do? So we decided, my friend Christopher Mitchell at Institute for Local Self-Reliance, some of you know him, and a few others decided that, hey, let's hold a tribal broadband boot camp, and where better to hold that than my house? So I have some land in Southern California, can social distance, we can practice safe, COVID restrictions, and we can get a bunch of people there. So 29 people showed at my place, and we had this boot camp that was a success. It was funded by Internet Society, and gangbusters. We had another one about, 8 months later, and doubled the people. We've since had one on the Yurok Reservation, one at the University of Oregon. There's another one at my house in December. We're having one at the Gila River community next year. Arizona State will host one. There's going to be one in New Mexico, and then I believe the Hoopa will host one, and then we're going to probably have one in Colville. But it was an opportunity to get tribal networking folks. It's similar to yourselves, right? But in the tribal sphere, together to talk about their issues, their solutions, their problems, to be able to create a human network, which you have here, which I would love to introduce them all to NANOG and just kind of have a big chunk of tribal networkers show up at NANOG. But the goal is to get people together to talk about solutions and talk about their problems and talk about how to work with this stuff. And that's what you do here, and that's what we're kind of doing there. So then tribalresourcecenter.net is a place where we collect a lot of this information so tribes can have a space to go to. Oh, that was awesome. So the Golden State Net, I'm just going to touch on a few of these things individually. 109 federally recognized tribes, 500, that's old, 574 now in the US. The Tribal Digital Village Network is in that circle. That's where I've been the last 21 years, building high-speed wireless network, but realizing now with some of the opportunity that California is building out, that there's going to be opportunity for fiber at each of those reservations, and then building out wireless from that fiber, or even building fiber to the home. This is the statewide objective. You can find this on their site, California's Broadband for All. There's a number of organizations working together with the governor's office to try to solve this. Almost $4 billion is a lot of money. It's not quite enough to do enough small fiber rings, and you know, it's always nice to have more money. But if you think about how fiber works best, ring architecture, overlapping, interconnected, and spread out like, you know, all over the state, it would be nice to make 3 or 4 times as many rings and make them smaller. But at least it's a good foundational start. So the map as presented by the Public Utilities Commission and some of the other fiber assets and the build out looks about like this. Obviously some rings need to be created off of those spurs, but you can find this online, and it's updated. It's a live map, so it's updated as things change. And these are the partners that are working with California in that effort, and you know, and I'm trying to make sure that 109 tribes have access to all of this as we move through. And so I'll switch over to Arcadian Infracom, because Arcadian is doing very similar things to what California is doing, is building long-haul fiber opportunities that allow connectivity throughout the route, and specifically designed to build through the places that haven't been built through yet, because they were left behind, and provide opportunity all throughout those routes. So Arcadian's lines are the blue and the red, and that is roughly, I mean, it's a guesstimation, but it's roughly the fiber map of the United States. Yes, there's some missing pieces, but the giant holes that you see everywhere are where the tribes are nestled, right in the middle of no connectivity. So the Arcadian route is doing that, which provides a lot of opportunity to communities throughout those regions for connectivity. It strengthens, obviously, the Navajo in yellow there. It dramatically strengthens the Navajo's access to broadband, both in the northwest and all the way to the northeast, and then in the south. If you see in the middle there, the hole in the middle of Navajo is Hopi, and Hopi will benefit from this as well. And you have, you know, just an array of different locations in rural America that will have access to broadband. And on the top right, Arcadian is building. We're building over Wolf Creek Pass right now, and there's our first handhold there with our Arcadian logo, which is kind of cool. Wolf Creek Pass, I don't know if anybody knows it in Colorado, but is a nightmare build. It's a 2-year build. It's probably almost frozen by now. Maybe by the end of the day it'll be frozen. They won't be able to build till next year. But it is an amazing place to cross the Continental Divide. So jumping into the tribal broadband boot camps, I think you should go there and watch that video. It's a lot of fun. You get a lot of testimonial from what people have been able to do, getting together and talking about networking, you know, experiencing, I think, camaraderie in the networking space is what they don't have. A lot of people are operating in a silo. They don't have access to somebody else doing the same thing. They don't realize that they have very similar problem sets than their neighbors, their tribal neighbors. In one situation, and I wish I would have thrown this picture in the slides, but the Yurok, the Hupa, and the Karuk tribes, for the first time, as far as the technologist people said, in their history, in their lifetime history, are working together now at home. And they took a picture of a router on a pole as if it were the flag at Iwo Jima, and they were all holding the flag up. And it was pretty cool. They did that at my place, and it became sort of an icon for their their builds. They're all building networks. Both the Yurok and the Hoopa tribe got in the neighborhood of $70 million from the NTIA funding to build out their infrastructure, which will dramatically change the opportunities in the region. And they learned a lot of what they needed to do here at this boot camp. They learned more of the language. They learned how to communicate to their tribal leadership in terms that the leadership would understand. They learned how to frame some of the issues when they were talking to the federal government. They learned how to frame some of the issues when they were talking to their people. So it was one of those situations where now they have this network of people that they continue to talk to each other on an online platform. And I see the transmission going by, and I just get to watch every part of the conversation. I'm just excited that I'm not the middleman anymore. And there's so much wonderful things happening and solutions being slinged left and right. It's really cool. So we had one of the godfathers himself show up to the boot camp at University of Oregon, Dr. Vince Cerf. And we had a really great turnout. We had 54 people show up at the University of Oregon and got trained in fiber splicing, fiber management, wireless communications. We set up remote links on the campus and connected wireless links and showed traffic routing and different things like that. NSRC, Network Startup Resource Center, was very gracious in donating a bunch of equipment and educational time through their people, through Dale Smith, and we had Bob Stovall there from Merit Network in Michigan, teaching some of the fiber splicing. So we had a really good, well-rounded crew, very engaging process, and just an absolute success. So we're excited to, we're really excited to continue this process and maybe invite some of you to actually come in and guest speak at some of these boot camps to talk about the different types of networks that exist and what you're working on. You can see folks here working on different aspects of the fiber solutions. And then tribalresourcecenter.net. This started under People-Centered Internet. Vince Cerf was the chair with Mei Len Fung. They started this organization, obviously People-Centered Internet, to focus on that aspect of things. And I became sort of the tribal lead there, helping Vint place money with Native American projects to advance, obviously broadband in the tribal space. What we grew this into with Internet Society Foundation money was a resource center that allowed people to kind of a one-stop shop for the things you need to know about networking, and to try to wrap your head around this project that you now are having to take on because nobody else will serve your community. So this is sort of a starting point. It ranges from, so you want to build a network, here's how you start, to you don't want to build a network, but you need to entice somebody to come in to build a network. And here's where you start, to you already have a network, but you want your network to be better. So, and then all of the things in between. So with this, we are looking for resources, training videos, opportunities to work with any and all of your networks to be able to support these Native communities in teaching and training. So we are trying to gather or link to great opportunities that exist for the Native American communities to be able to use this as a one-stop shop. So federal funding streams. I'm going to touch on this a little bit. So we talked a little bit about it in the beginning, where we roughly have a $10 billion problem for the connectivity for the home on the Indian reservations, and we have the lower 48 is a unique animal, and there's a bunch of variety there. Alaska is another horribly different situation with lack of middle mile connectivity, dramatic lack of services and opportunities. And then you have Hawaii, which has been in turmoil a couple times, misuse of funds and a few mismanagements, so it's kind of a hot mess. Federal funding came out through the CARES Act funding, the IIJA funding, the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program. Treasury has money, RUS has money, USDA, and a few others. And they're trying to get enough access to that funding for tribes to operate, build, successfully solve this internet problem. And as we discussed, I'm going to throw these up there because these are more fun. As we discussed, there isn't quite enough. So maybe we're at a third of that solution. Where's the rest of that money going to come from? These networks don't have a lot of return on investment because there's not a huge population base. So, understandably, the carriers that were incentivized multiple times to get there never wanted to build them out because there's not a big return on that investment on that infrastructure. But now that we are building the infrastructure to get to our reservation, it should be a lot lower or a lot lighter lift for those that are carriers that could serve our communities to come in and build off the end of that middle mile connectivity to actually help us out. And maybe there's a return on investment there because the balance is a little better because they haven't dumped all the money into the middle mile. Maybe not. But tribes are out there building in places that don't have power. And we would like, to work with organizations that provide a level of support. Some of the tribes want to run this themselves. Some of the tribes absolutely don't want outside influence. Some of the tribes are willing to sign a deal with, one of the colors, blue, red, yellow carriers, and say, yeah, you do it. We don't care. Just get internet to the people. Some of the tribes absolutely don't want another ounce of participation from anyone, and they want to do it themselves, so they're learning how to do this. The Tribal Digital Village Network is a good example of that. But we're seeing the Tribal Digital Village Network in this day and age start to come apart a little bit because it is a wireless solution. As we all know, wireless is awesome, but wireless doesn't scale like fiber. So at the point where you have 4 people in a household, 2 of them on school, 2 of them trying to work remotely, all at the same time, doing video conferencing, we've seen the limitations of our wireless network get strained. So how do we do fiber to the home? How do we get, more bandwidth and more capacity to each individual? How do we get a network design that we can trust to be the right solution for our communities when you drop $3 billion in the water, there's a lot of sharks, right? So how do we vet those people that are, coming to us and saying, oh, we got the solution for your reservation. We got this figured out. Tribes have heard that for a long time. So, if you have those levels of capacity in your, vast community of folks that are doing these things, we'd love to engage on that level with you to better understand solutions for our communities and work together devising that solution rather than being told how to solve our problem. So another thing I wanted to just touch about real fast is the spectrum issue. I've got a bit of time left. So some of you may be aware that there was a tribal a tribal priority window for spectrum at the Federal Communications Commission in the 2.5 gigahertz, which was EBS, educational broadcast. It was recalled for, I don't know if it was misuse or unintended use, and we were able to apply the tribal priority window for tribes to opt into the license over their land. So to be able to do this, we need tools, right? We need the tools of the trade, and spectrum is one of those tools of the trade, but it's very expensive. Carriers aren't intending to serve over tribal lands, so tribes would very much like to be a part of the group that has a toolbox full of tools. So when that opportunity came up, tribes were very eager to get a piece of this, piece of the toolbox. And the FCC projected that there would only be 12 applications for the tribal priority window in 2.5. There were over 400, and about 400 licenses have been given. And there's a misunderstanding about the value of a full power FCC license. what do you use it for? We use it to build networking, right? Guess what tribes also use it for? A bankable asset to borrow money to build that network. Because tribes don't have access to bankable assets. You cannot repossess sovereign land. The bank can't come take your land away because it is held in trust by the federal government for your tribe. So they don't have land to put up as collateral. So they don't have very much stuff that they can say, hey, we want to borrow some money. What do you have as collateral? Well, we don't have this land. We don't have a lot of things. So this was the first time we actually got access to something that we could actually put up as collateral. So it was sort of a key ingredient in some of these smaller tribes being able to build out their network, get funding all at once to be able to solve the problem. So we are very interested in any time that spectrum moves to be able to have a tribal priority window to be able to get that for our reservations. Not for non-reservation land, but for our reservations. We want to be able to use those tools to serve our community. And I think that's the last of my slide deck, and I'm a little bit short on presentation, but I feel like there's an opportunity to maybe have a discussion if we have any questions in the crowd, and I would like to queue up those microphones if I could and get rolling.
There. So your discussion was very fiber centric, but as you mentioned, a lot of these areas, the terrain is very challenging, right? And so how deep is the discussion currently with private 5G on reservations? And is there consideration of using CBRS spectrum, for instance? Thank you.
Actually, that is a very hot topic right now. It will be addressed. I think there's actually a track at the Indigenous Connectivity Summit coming up in Winnipeg, specifically talking about private 5G networks. CBRS is a very attractive space for tribes to use, a little bit more lenient in some of the rulemaking process and such. So yes, it is absolutely a focus of some of the reservations, especially if they have bigger land mass. So thank you.
Tom Strix, Cloudflare. Thanks a lot for that talk. Super interesting. I was wondering what you would think is the most unique challenge currently experienced by Native American networks.
The most unique challenge. Whoa. That's really, there's not enough of us doing this. I could count both hands probably the amount of people that are engaging. Prior to this last couple of years, there was probably only 10 of us that were fighting these policy battles and doing that stuff. And it's always the same usual suspects doing the work. In the last couple of years, because I think the pandemic, we've been able to increase our numbers and sort of educate some of those that have been following along. Because, there's a lot to be done. And with just a handful of us actually being out there and advocating and such, it's really hard to cover all the bases. And to get to places like this, which, sort of overlap, but not really, sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it doesn't. We want to make sure that we are having this conversation everywhere that matters to us. And this is a great room to have this conversation, but I think it's tough. There's just not enough people engaged in this space. I think now that we saw over 400 applications for the tribal priority window for the wireless spectrum, some of the money that's coming now as tribes are actually engaging and building departments around this. I think we're going to see more advocacy, and I think that'll actually increase the opportunity. But until now, it's probably been just a lack of people to be able to do this work. So thank you.
Andrew Dahl, I had a question about what from this community would you like to see more of?
What?
Other than being aware, right? So
Right.
we're aware because you're here, and that's great. So what interactions and how can this community better support you and your work, I guess maybe a better question.
Yeah. So it's a good question because I've never been very good at figuring out how to transplant you into the reservation for a few minutes and tap into your, expertise, if it were, on that level. I've not been able to figure. I've had a lot of offers from a lot of different organizations, and we don't code, we don't do certain things. I think what we need to do is maybe integrate folks from this community, maybe into the broadband boot camps, where we can showcase some of the cool work that you do, and some of what that looks like specifically. that may translate to a community network or what actually looks more like a municipal network for a tribe because it's government owned. It owns the economic development, the education, everything lives on the one network. So maybe it's something where we can kind of tap into that expertise and have showcases at the tribal broadband boot camps where we can, capture that on video and then have that encapsulated in time for, for people to see. Maybe that's a start. But I would love to work with you. I'll give you my card afterwards and figure out how we can make some of that happen. Thank you.
Dave Siegel, Siegel Group LLC. So it looked like your presentation focused a lot on the last mile, basically. I apologize, I missed the first part, so maybe you went into this, but
Yeah.
There's obviously a lot of funding in California going to Golden State Network.
Yeah, I did do that. The whole first half of the presentation was that.
So my question is, I apologize if this is retreading.
No worries.
Is there been enough planning to make sure that the middle mile network is actually going and getting to the each of the reservations that need the access, or is that still largely an unsolved problem in terms of funding to not only take the last mile and get it to some place that can get it to the internet?
So yeah, I don't know if you caught the fact that I actually am the tribal liaison for Golden State Network. I'm actually working with them to work with 109 tribes. So I am doing my best to reach out to all 109 tribes. The guidance initially was to stay on Caltrans right away. So the Caltrans right away doesn't reach every single tribe, but it gets close. Mm-hmm. So I am working with each of those tribes to identify how close that opportunity is, what that solution might look like in their eyes, and how to work together to devise the proper solution to make sure that they're a part of that network. And then also then looking forward to identify funding that would bridge the gap if they are not on the Caltrans right away.
All right,
so,
sounds good. Catch me later.
Thank you. Yes, Denise.
Hi. So Denise with Arcadian, and I appreciate, Matt, this interaction. I wanted to speak to a question that was asked about a unique challenge, not being from the Native American community, but working with Arcadian and seeing how that interaction is. Two words just came to mind when he said that, and that was integrity and trust. That's people that have been in the business space for a long time. We tend to do business with people that we trust. We tend to do business with people that, we move around in the industry and, you get your tribe, your group, right? Networking folks, and you keep doing business with them. It is so interesting to me, the trust that has been built up from a small group of people to bring things like this to the forefront. And I think expanding on that is really important. So, the other question that was asked is what could this group do? And I think expanding that in little ways, because trust is built over a period of time. It's built over keeping your word. It's built over, giving back. And so that's been a really interesting process for me to watch, coming from the business space, right? But then moving on into this other space as well.
Yeah, I think what we see, so the tribal networking folks, the tribal IT directors and broadband directors of the tribes are fans of a lot of your networks, right? They watch what you do, they watch how you build your networks. They look at your products, they look at, your services, and they think, wow, this would be really cool to have, for Indian country. And how do we convert that and make that part of Indian country? So there is already a level of respect between the tribal networking community and your Nanon community, right? And the individual work that you do. Because we see the value of what you do, and we probably use your services every day if we have access to internet. So there is already a level of that trust. And it would be nice to expand upon that. And like the gentleman said, open up opportunities to engage with some of your expertise and your engineers and your thinkers about how to solve some of our problems together and make better solutions. Sorry.
Hey, we've got a question from online. Are you seeing any similar issues in Pacific Northwest tribes?
In Northwest tribes?
Pacific Northwest.
Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
Yeah, so We are actually going to be doing one of the broadband boot camps on the Colville Reservation, and we've had several folks. I think we had all 9 of the Oregon tribes represented at the boot camp in the University of Oregon boot camp that we did. So some of those tribes have gotten this similar funding. Some of those tribes didn't get funding. Some of those tribes got access to the tribal priority window and 2.5 gigahertz. Some didn't. They are all interested in building out networks. They are all interested in dissolving old problematic relationships with carriers that don't really serve the communities and expanding upon the new opportunities and growth. So the AT&I, which is the Affiliated Tribes of the Northwest Indians, is very active. They have a track that is related to technology and broadband at their summits, and I think they have 2 or 3 a year. And each of those summits addresses the issues as a collective, and then they individually work on problems. Some work together on problems, which is great. They have some really strong leaders there. They have Valerie Fasthorse, who runs Red Spectrum at Coeur d'Alene. And they have Danae Wilson, who just took the broadband director of the Office of the President of the United States from the Nez Perce tribe. And she has left behind her network for a period of time to support the nation. So they have a really strong leadership there in the broadband space. And they have a gentleman named Ernie Rasmussen who just joined the Colville efforts and building things out. I worked with the folks at the Spokane, and they are sort of unifying around this opportunity to build out broadband. So the Pacific Northwest is live and functional in this space. Yes.
Hi, my name is Kendra. My company just recently moved into the Phoenix, Arizona footprint, and we're actually working with Gila Valley currently, and we ourselves are trying to figure out how that was. So I just wanted to thank you. It was extremely informative, and I would love to see again how we can support some of the tribal land in Arizona. So I would love to speak with you after, but thank you so much.
Sure.
It's so informative and good websites for me to be able to look at and kind of see what other opportunities we can do. We're doing some middle mile stuff down in the Tucson area because again, it's an underserved
nice.
market and we're aware of that. So
Yeah, absolutely.
thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I think we're good. Thank you very much, everyone.